Everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning back in. Today I want to share with you a tricky portrait that I read recently, and it is tricky mainly because of the question that it was drawn to answer. So I drew this portrait for myself, and the question was about whether I stay or I leave in a certain place. You can pause the video and have a thought about this, and you will see why the reading was generally tricky. So I suggest you do this to sort of jog a little bit your interpretation of the portrait and unpause the video to hear what I have to say about it and why I came to the conclusion that I initially did. And then at the end of the video, I will tell you what the answer turned out to be in real life. So obviously I kept a record of it, and I checked back in after I got the information that I needed to draw the conclusion. So when I ask whether to stay or to leave, obviously the coffin is going to be a key card. The problem with the coffin, as far as I'm concerned, is that it can suggest both an ending as well as a waiting time. So from the get-go, the coffin in a key position, which is the first and the central cards of the portrait, was more or less confusing. On top of this, there was the tower in the center. The tower is a card of longevity and the long term. It is not a moving card, so it doesn't represent change. So this card suggested that I stay. And on top of this, we have the flowers. And the flowers is a card of renewal. So it points again to this idea of continuing with the current path. So I took the first diagonal to suggest waiting until, waiting for this phase to pan out instead of leaving. So I took the first line as staying. The second diagonal is also very suggestive of the idea of staying. The tree, tower, and lily are three slow cards. They unfold over time. They are unmoving cards, and again they suggest the idea of staying. Now the other cards came in to bring in, if you like, the confusion whether to stay or to leave, how to answer the question. The top row is a combination of change. So with the ship on the other side of the coffin and the lily on the other side of the ship suggesting a new lease of life, a new phase, I felt that this top line could suggest a change. The middle row again suggested the idea of staying. There was like an administrative element in the picture. It had to do with a renewal of my current stay. So this pair here suggested the contract or the agreement, and then with the garden and tower it suggested the idea of staying again. But then again, the bottom row suggested a change because we have the scythe on the other side of the tree, and that is clearly an uprooting. And the flowers on the other side of the scythe wouldn't be so much a renewal or a continuation like it would in the first diagonal, but it would suggest like a happy change. You know, the idea of refreshing yourself after you've moved, you've changed, and you've left. So this added to the confusion. Moving on to the columns, we have the coffin and the letter and the tree. And I felt that this one could go both ways as well. The idea of leaving and with the letter entry can suggest this announcement or this agreement of sorts that, I was going to leave. But it could go in the other direction as well, with the coffin entry suggesting the idea of staying. And again, the letter being that administrative element, the agreement, so sticking with the initial decision of staying, which was the case. Now, the central column added to the confusion and suggested leaving because we have the scythe, and obviously this is a card that T-crosses both lines. So the scythe on the other side of the tower, as far as I'm concerned, has to do with releasing the past. And so it cuts short the phase that is represented by the tower, and so it suggests leaving. And on top of that, we have the ship, which is also a card of travel and movement. And then the last column added to the idea of staying. So the lily and garden being in a place, being settled, and the flowers, the idea, again, renewing the situation and sort of enjoying the stay while I'm at it. So a bit like how the flower played out with the tower, I felt it sort of played out as well with the garden, just adding a sense of well-being and happiness in the current location, suggesting that I should take advantage of the time in this place instead of leaving or moving. So these were like a mixed bag, and this portrait was confusing. There were other indications that suggested leaving, and these are the arrows, especially the one with the first card here, with the coffin, scythe, and the coffin and garden, and the scythe and garden, as you see in the inner the inner diagonals. It was clear that there were additional indications of leaving. The lily with the scythe and letter could have also suggested that. And then there was this one with the coffin, scythe, and lily, like cutting short the stay. So I had lots of reasons to be confused about whether the portrait was saying that whether I should stay or whether I should leave. But I went with the idea of staying because for me, the first diagonal is very important because it carries the 2 key cards, and also because the tower is in the center of the portrait, and this is a key card suggesting the idea of staying and waiting and letting things to pan out over time. So in terms of my question, whether to stay or to leave, it's clearly about staying. And so in this sense, it can sort of influence the coffin and suggest that the coffin in this case is not so much an ending, but it's a card of patience and waiting. And also with the flowers in the first diagonal, the idea of renewing and extending the stay came through. I felt also that the second diagonal was pretty potent, and all 3 cards in this line have to do with staying. And then I also looked at the last column here. The right column is associated with the idea of the later part of a situation. Not always the outcome. Some people can read it as the outcome, but it is associated with the later parts of the reading or the story as it unfolds. And it is a combination that clearly has to do with staying. So I took that as a suggestion of staying as well. Now, what's tricky about these columns is that the first column can point to staying, the second column can point to staying, but the middle column is very much about change. But in light of the 2, on either side of the central column, this could also be a change of plan and letting go of the idea of moving for the time being, like releasing this idea of moving right away, and instead just sticking with it. So again, the portrait could have gone both ways pretty easily. I ended up going with the idea of staying because of the 2 diagonals and the influence of the right-hand side column, and also other arrows such as the tree, ship, and garden, so waiting before leaving as well. I picked that up, and I went to the conclusion that it's best to wait and finish off this phase before leaving. So the idea is that I was going to leave anyway, but I wanted to cut it short and leave sooner than it was planned. And so that was the initial question, whether I leave before the end of the initial commitment period or not. And I decided that this portrait is telling me that I should wait it out and finish off the phase. The top row could have also been read as postponing the trip, and sort of just going with the suggestion. The corner cards could also suggest that pretty strongly. So the coffin and flowers, the idea of renewing where I'm staying, and then the tree and lily also sticking around. Admittedly, this comes in contrast with the inner diamond, which is also a clear combination of a change, but it can also point to a change of plans. So whereas I wanted to leave, I could change this plan and wait before I leave, wait a while longer before I leave. And notice also that there are both elements at play, and both elements are truly at play in the situation. So there is a point where I'm going to leave. The question was more about the timing. The tower is very helpful in this regard as far as I'm concerned, because the tower is a card of time and longevity. So it really figuring in the center of the portrait really helped me tip the balance towards the conclusion. And the conclusion that I made was that I should stick it out and be patient before I leave. And I was trying to negotiate the change, negotiate the exit, but that wasn't successful. So the portrait and my interpretation of it turned out to be accurate, and the idea that I should wait it out and stick around was what came out in reality. So it turned out to be an accurate prediction. So I wanted to share with you this portrait as an example of how sometimes readings can be tricky. And the reason really I wanted to do that is because they are not tricky a lot of the time. Because in Lenormand, you are free to combine the cards in a way that makes sense. So contradictions are not necessarily going to happen if you are flexible with how you interpret the cards, and you can put the cards in a way that is not contradictory. But in this portrait, I felt that there were potentially some contradictions. And so what really helped with tipping the balance towards the idea of staying and not so much leaving was, for me, the tower and how it played out in different diagonals and in different combinations as well, in addition to other structures and other lines that contributed to the strength of the tower. So let me know how you would have read this portrait. Let me know your thoughts about it. Let me know if there were other things you picked up that could have maybe changed the interpretation. I'd also be interested to know if you came across readings like that where really the cards could have gone in a couple of different ways, but then you decided to rely on some cards like a central card or some other key indication that you felt stood out in the reading so that you could make a choice of an interpretation over another. And I've said before that if there are different ways to interpret the cards and they don't contradict each other, you can go with all of these interpretations. But if there are different interpretations that do contradict each other, then you will need to make a decision, which is the case in this portrait. So let me know how you like this interpretation. Let me know if you have additional thoughts about the way the cards can be read and other insights we can draw from them. And let me know also if you've come across such a reading where there were real contradictions and you had to make a decision about which interpretation to go with. I hope this was helpful by way of example. Again, I look forward to your comments as always. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take very good care of yourself.